Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and we will be learning Amir Hashem today, Daf Tzadik Zayin Amid Beis. We pick up on Daf Tzadik Zayin Amid Aleph, Siman Samach Gimel, Sif Gimel, 2 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch. Of course, we are continuing to learn Hilchas Kriya Shema. Let's just get that light on. Okay, there we go. So says the Mechaber Sif Gimel. If somebody was walking on his way, and now he wants to say Kriya Shema. He realizes it's time to say Kriya Shema, so he wants to say Kriya Shema while he's walking. Now let's remember that in Sif Aleph, the Mechaber told us, Kairei Oisa Mahalech. You are allowed to recite Kriya Shema to be Mekayim Your Chiyuv while you're walking. So over here it says the Mechaber in Sif Gimel, if you are walking and you want to say Kriya Shema, tzarich lamoid b'pasuk rishon. You need to stop walking when you say the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. So, and this is a theme that's going to continue, we see that the first pasuk of Kriya Shema has a different din than the rest of Kriya Shema. The Shita Samachaber, and really nobody argues, you are allowed to say Kriya Shema when you're walking, but not the first pasuk. For the first pasuk, you need to stop, and we're going to see it's not only the first pasuk, but it's also Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusai as well. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Cotton Test, Haya Mahalich. If somebody was walking, points out the Chavetz Chaim, Afa Gav de Le'el Sif Aleph, even though earlier in Sif Aleph, Mashmad is very clearly implied, it's not only implied, it's clearly stated, De Min Adin Mutar Likreis Kishu Mahalich, that Me'ikar Adin, the Mechaber holds you are allowed to say Kriya Shema while you're walking. Mikamakim, nevertheless, the mitzvah min hamuvchar, it is the proper way to be Mekayim the mitzvah. Lamoid, to stop Bishas Pasuk Rishon while you are reciting the first Pasuk. Why? To who Ikar Kriya Shema. Because the first Pasuk, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that is the Ikar Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim, that is the Ikar of Kriya Shema. And therefore, why do you have to stop? Because while you're walking, just the nature is that while you're walking, you're not settled. And you're not able to have the same level of kavana, kishuhu mahalech, while you're walking, kashar haya yoshev, as if when you're standing in one place. Yoshev over here does not mean sitting. You do not have to say even the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. You certainly do not have to say it while sitting down. It means in one place, and we're going to see that clearly from the Mishnah Berurah shortly. B'diavad imkara kishu mahalech. B'diavad, if you did say even the first pasuk of Kriya Shema while you're walking, einoi tzarich lachsav likreis. The Pri Megadim says you certainly don't have to repeat it. Because again, Me'ikar Adin, we saw the halacha in Sif Aleph. Me'ikar Adin, the halacha is that you are Yotzei Kriya Shema, you are allowed to say Kriya Shema, even the first pasuk, while you're walking. We don't want you to. For the first pasuk, we want you to stop. Because that's the Ikar Shema. Over there, you must have kavana. And when somebody is walking, he's not settled, as if he's stopped in one place, whether standing or sitting. The words of the Mechaber were tzarich lamoid, which would usually be translated literally as you have to stand. Says Mishnah Berurah, that's not what it means. Ritzayna loymar, the word lamoid over here does not mean to stand. It means to stop. Lehisakev b'makom echad. It means you're in the middle of walking, now you want to say Kriya Shema, you need to stop while you say the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. But certainly you could say it whether you're standing or sitting, as long as you're stopped in one place. Even for Kriya Shema Shal Arvis, you're allowed to say it while you're standing, and you're allowed to, if you're in the middle of walking, see, he just said now that you could say Kriya Shema whether you're standing or sitting, right? The Mechaber is talking about a case where somebody is walking. And the Mechaber said that for the first pasuk of Kriya Shema, tzarich lamoid. And the Mishnah Berurah pointed out that Sarach Lamed does not mean that he has to stand. It means that he has to stop. He has to stay in one place. But the Mishnah Berurah said, when he stops in one place, he could then say Kriya Shema whether he's standing or whether he's sitting. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, that's true even by Ma'ariv. What does that mean? Even by Kriya Shema Shal Arvis. If you're walking, you should stop walking. And if you want to sit down and say Kriya Shema, you can. What's the Chiddush? The Chiddush is that you might have thought stopping and sitting down looks like you're pasking like Beis Shammai. Because remember, Machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai says that Kriya Shema Shal Shachris is Bekumecha, when you're standing. Kriya Shema Shal Arvis is B'shachbecha, when you're laying down or at least sitting down. So if somebody is walking by Kriya Shema Shal Arvis, and now he stops and sits down and says Kriya Shema, maybe that looks like he's paskening like Beis Shammai. And when we said yesterday, if somebody does that Nikra Avarian, you're not allowed to go be noyig like Beis Shammai. That could create big problems, right? It looks like you're paskening like Beis Shammai. B'shach b'cha v'kumecha is for the position that you're in when you say Kriya Shema, but not for Zman Kriya Shema. It would take away Zman Kriya Shema. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. Over here, when you were walking, you could stop walking and even sit down, and it does not look like you're paskening like Beis Shammai. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, the dafke im mishana me amida yeshiva also l'kriya shema shel arvis. What's aser by Ma'ariv because it looks like you're paskening like Beis Shammai? That's if you're standing by your stender in shul, and now you say Baruch Atah Hashem Ohev Amo Yisrael, and now you sit down and you say Shema. Now it looks like you're being noyeg like Beis Shammai. You were standing, and now you sat down. But now that's not the case. Over here, we're talking about a case where you were walking. The dafke mishana me amida yeshiva also l'kriya shema shel arvis mishum the nearest sha'isik Beis Shammai mashe ein kein mehalicha yeshiva. To change from walking to sitting down does not look like you're paskening like Beis Shammai. Okay, another halacha says the Chavetz Chaim. V'yoshev b'karoin. We're saying over here, the Mechaber said that if you're traveling, if you're moving, you need to stop for the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. Okay, how about if you're sitting in a car and you're moving at 60 miles per hour? Do you need to stop the car to say the first pasuk of Kriya Shema? Or in the language of the Chavetz Chaim, if you're in a wagon, do you have to ask the wagon driver to stop? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. The Yoshev b'karoin, somebody who's sitting in a wagon or a car, or a sfina, or on a boat, einoy tzarich lamed. They don't have to stop the boat. The yuchal l'chaved heitev, because that person can have proper kavanah. He's not moving himself. He's sitting on a boat that's moving, or he's sitting in a car that's moving. But he's sitting, so he can have kavanah. Ein b'shari tshuva u'b'pri begadim. U'b'roichev hala behema, as far as somebody riding on an animal, yesh te'is beina achronim. Over there already we have a dispute amongst the achronim whether or not he has to stop v'dachar l'hachmir, and it would be proper if you're going horseback riding and you have to say Kriya Shema, it would be proper to be machmir and to stop. Ois Katan Yud Aleph, this halach is negea b'pasuk rishain, by the first pasuk of Kriya Shema, u'baruch shem k'vayid malchusay la'olam vayed, bechlal pasuk rishain hu, that is included in the first pasuk, v'yesh machmirin ad al levavecha, and there are those who are machmir even so far as to the middle of the ahavta, v'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele asher anoichi mitzavecha hayom ala levavecha. Umisham v'hala mutar l'kraisa b'halicha ba'amida, but certainly after that, you're allowed to recite Kriya Shema even while you're walking, standing, it doesn't matter. Okay. Now we go back to Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph, bottom line in the Shulchan Aruch Sif Daled. Iker HaKavana, the main part of Kriya Shema where you must have Kavana. Now what does it mean Kavana? Remember, earlier we spoke about the machlokes whether or not mitzvah is tzrichas Kavana. Over there we said that's talking about the Kavana to be Mekayim the mitzvah. Remember, we said there's two different types of Kavana. One Kavana is Kavana to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Hashem Yisbarach. Then there's another Kavana. That's the Kavana on the words of Kriya Shema, kavana on Kriya Shema, to think what you're saying. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. You have to think, what does that mean? Here, Klal Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem our God, Hashem Echad, Hashem is one. That kavana. That's the kavana that we're speaking about here today. Ikar kavana. The main place in Kriya Shema where you must have kavana, hu b'pasuk rishain. That is on the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hilkach, therefore, im karav aloi kivei libay b'pasuk rishain. If somebody recited Kriya Shema and he failed to have kavana by the first pasuk, lo yotza yidei chayvasai. He's not yoytze his chiyuv of saying Kriya Shema. V'chayzer v'kayrei. And he has to repeat Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. He has to repeat it and say it over again. Va'afilu l'man diyamar mitzvahs einon tzrichais kavana. Even the man diyamar that we had earlier, that says mitzvahs einon tzrichais kavana, not by this kavana. Mitzvahs einon tzrichais kavana means that man diyamar holds you don't have to have kavana to be mekayim the mitzvah. But kavana on what Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad means, that you must have. So says the Mechaber over here in Sif Dalet, the ikar place where we must have kavana in Kriya Shema, and like the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, the ikar kabbalas ol malchus shamayim. That's the pasuk of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And if you failed to have kavana on what the words mean by Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, if your mind is on the office, if your mind is on breakfast, if you're just spaced out and you're tired and you're mumbling Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, you don't have kavana, you're not yoytza the mitzvahs asay daraisa, the chiyuv asay daraisa of saying Kriya Shema, because you failed to have kavana, the chayzer v'kayrei, and you have to go ahead, you have to say it over again. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, is cut in Yud Beis. The pasuk Rishain, the ikar is by the first pasuk, Ayin Sif Katan Yud Aleph. He sends us back to the previous Sif Katan of the Mishnah Berurah. The Huadin Baruch Shem Kfay Bachusay Loilam Vayed has the same din as the pasuk of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, V'em Lo Kiven Bay Gamkein, and if you didn't have kavana by Baruch Shem Kfay Bachusay Loilam Vayed, Tzarech Lachzar V'Likrais B'Kavana, you have to go back and say it over again with kavana. Ois Katan Yud Gimel Lo Yotza. If you fail to have kavana by Shema Yisrael, you're not yotza. Afilu im kaidem shehis chelikrois niskaven lekayim b'hakriya hamitzvah sasei de Kriya Shema. This is true even if the fellow got up to Kriya Shema and he had in mind, I'm having kavana to be yotza the mitzvah sasei daraisa of Kriya Shema. So he's not half asleep. He had in mind kavana to be yotza the mitzvah, but he didn't have in mind what the words mean. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even in that case, become makom nevertheless, kol shebe'emtza pana libay l'dvar b'cherim, if in the midst of saying Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, he got distracted and his mind turned to other topics, harei loy kibel olav malchus shamayim b'askamas aleif. It's very nice that he said Kriya Shema, and it's very nice that he even had kavanah to be yotze the mitzvah of Kriya Shema. But was he b'kabel ol malchus shamayim? No, he doesn't know idea what he said. He just said empty words, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So the lips were moving, but the heart wasn't thinking, the mind wasn't thinking. So he wasn't b'kabel ol malchus shamayim, he wasn't yotze the mitzvah. Ois Katan Yud Dalet, the chayzer v'kayrei, and therefore he has to go back and he has to say it over again. Points out the Mishnah Berurah, yes, he has to go back and say it over again, but balachash, he has to say it the second time quietly. Why? Remember, we said earlier, if somebody says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, it sounds like he's being mekabel shtei reshuyos. It sounds like he's suggesting that there are two deities in the world, and on each one he's being mekabel ol malchus shamayim chas v'chalila. So says the Mishnah Berurah, yes, he has to repeat it over again, but the second time he should say it quietly. V'ayin la'el b'siman samach aleph b'Mishnah Berurah sif katan chav beis. He sends us back to Siman samach aleph, where we learned over there that that's true if you're b'tzibur. But if you're davening at home and you're all alone, then you could say it even the second time b'kol rav. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. Va'afilu im kvar kara kol parsha shema v'haya im shamaya. Let's say this person is having a rough morning. He said Shema Yisrael Shem Elokeinu Shem Echad. Baruch Shem Kvar Malchus Elam Avoid. He said the whole paragraph of Ve'ahavta. So he has recited the entire first parsha of Kriya Shema. Now he goes to V'haya im shamaya and he recites the entire second parsha of Kriya Shema. So he says the whole V'haya im shamaya. V'achakach nizkar, and then when he finishes V'haya im shamaya, he wakes himself up and he remembers Shaloi Kara Pasuk Risha B'Kavana. Right? He says, "Laman Yubi Yemecha V'Mevenecha Malo Adam Asher Nishba Hashem Lavisechem Lo Seis Lam Kimei Hashemayim Al Haaretz." What am I doing? Oh my goodness! I just rattled off Kriya Shema all the way to the end of the second parsha, and I didn't have any kavana. So he just realizes now that he failed to have kavana by the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. What does he do now? Says the Mishnah Berurah, "Tzarich lachzor v'likrois kol haparsha shema." What he has to do is, remember, the kavana is only ma'akiv by the first pasuk, and by Baruch Shem Kvar Malchus Elam Avoid. Lechatchila, of course, you have to have kavana for the rest of Kriya Shema too. But if you didn't, it's not ma'akiv. So he said Shema Yisrael, he said Ve'ahavta, he said V'haya im shamaya. Maybe he said it all without kavana. But V'haya im shamaya, he was yaitza. He said it without kavana, but b'diavad he's yaitza. Really, Ve'ahavta, he was also yaitza. Because, again, you need kavana for Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem. For Ve'ahavta, b'diavad, you don't need kavana. B'diavad, you don't need kavana. But he has to go back, he has to say Shema, Baruch Shem, and Ve'ahavta. He can't just go back and say Shema. He has to say Shema, Baruch Shem, and Ve'ahavta. Why? Continues the Chavetz Chaim, because what he wanted to do, go back and just say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that doesn't work. That would be like somebody who recites one of the parshias of Kriya Shema out of order. In which case you're not Yoitze, like we're going to say later in Samach Dal and Sif Aleph. So what's the problem? The problem is, he already said Shema, he already said Ve'ahavta, he already said V'haya im shamaya. Now he realizes he never said Shema with Kavanah. If he goes back now and he says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that's not a full parsha of Kriya Shema. The first parsha of Kriya Shema is Shema, Baruch Shem, and Ve'ahavta. If he says Shema Yisrael now, in essence what he's doing is, he's saying the first parsha of Kriya Shema out of order. Because the first time he said Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, he said it without kavanah, so it counted for nothing. Then he said Ve'ahavta. Now Ve'ahavta counted b'diavad, even though he didn't have kavanah. Now he's saying Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So that means that he said the first parsha of Kriya Shema out of order. And if you say a parsha of Kriya Shema out of order, you're not Yoitze. So what does he have to do? He has to go back to Shema, say Shema, Baruch Shem, and Ve'ahavta. Now is he going to repeat V'haya im shamaya? No. B'diavad he was Yoitze V'haya im shamaya. So now he'll skip V'haya im shamaya and he'll go to Vayomer. It turns out now that he said Kriya Shema out of order. The parshiyos of Kriya Shema you could say out of order. It's just each parsha itself. The psukim of each parsha have to be recited in order. But if you said Shema and Ve'ahavta in order, and then you said Vayomer in order, and then you said V'haya im shamaya in order, that's okay. What this person in essence is doing is, he said V'haya im shamaya, now he's going back, he's saying Shema and Ve'ahavta, and then he's going to say Vayomer. So yes, the three parshias are out of order, but each parsha itself is in order, so that's okay. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. Another case. Maybe he realized he's in the middle of V'haya im shamaya. He says, Hishamaru lachem pen yiftel avavachem. Beware. Hishamaru lachem. Watch out for yourselves. Pen yiftel avavachem. Lest your heart be turned away. And then he realizes, oh, guess what? My heart was turned away. When I was saying Shema Yisrael, I was completely distracted. So now he realizes that he said Shema Yisrael without Kavanah when he's in the middle of V'haya im shamaya. So what should he do? Very simple. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Yigmar ad Vayomer. He should finish the second parsha. He should finish V'hayomer Shamaya until Vayomer. V'yaschil v'yikra Shema ad V'hayomer Shamaya. Then he should go back and say Shema and V'ahavta. V'yachzil parshas Vayomer, and then say the final parsha, the parsha of Vayomer. Eis Katan Tesvav, the Mechaber said that you must have kavanah on the meaning of the words of the first pasuk of Kriya Shema, and that's true even according to the Mandi Yamar that says mitzvahs einon tzriches kavanah, because that Mandi Yamar is talking about the kavanah to be yotzei the mitzvah, not the kavanah on the meaning of the words. So even that Mandi Yamar would be moideh hacha. He would agree over here that you have to have kavanah on the meaning of the words. Because even though that Mandi Yamar holds you, it's not necessary to have kavanah to be yotzei the mitzvah. But nevertheless, you must have kavanah on the meaning of the words of the first pasuk, so that you should be properly mekabel ol malchus shamayim. Sifhei says the Mechaber, second line down, the middle of the line. Imhaya yashein. You look next to you in shul, and there's somebody snoring away. He's out cold when it's up to Kriya Shema. Says the Mechaber, mitzarim oisai. You annoy him. Umi'irim oisai, and you wake him up. Ad yikra pasuk rishon, until he says the first pasuk, v'hu mamish, and he's mamish awake. So you annoy this guy until you see that he's completely awake, and he says the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. Mikan ve'elech, once he says the first pasuk of Kriya Shema, if he falls back asleep, ein mitzarim oisai kedei sheyikra v'hu mamish. You don't annoy him to make sure that he's fully awake. Because as long as he's saying the words, even if he's half asleep, yatsa is yatsa. So what do you mitzar him for? What do you annoy him for? You annoy him to make sure that he's fully awake when he says the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. Because for that he needs kavanah. For the rest of Kriya Shema, you keep shaking him awake to make sure that he's saying the words. But if he's dribbling and he's half asleep, so you know he's not having kavanah. That he's not doing. But the kavanah is not ma'akiv b'di'evet. What is ma'akiv is he has to actually say the words. So you have to wake him up to the extent that he's saying the words. But you don't have to annoy him to the extent that he should be fully awake. Because b'di'evet, even if he says it half asleep, so he doesn't have any kavanah b'di'evet, he's yaitza. Haggadah the Ramah says, V'din shosoi, somebody who's a little bit into his cups, V'shikar, or somebody who's mamish drunk. For the din of such people, Ayin l'kaman simin tzadik tes, Sef Aleph, B'yirtz Hashem, we'll discuss that when we get there. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Tes Zayin misnamnein, if this person is falling asleep. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'hu adin oines acher hamavatal kavanasoi. It doesn't only have to be sleep, it could be some other kind of oines that means that this guy can't be mechavein. Daharei al kol panim karakula, because the bottom line is, at least he's saying the words. So if the rest of Kriya Shema, other than the first pasuk, so long as he says the words, even if he's distracted, b'di'evet is yaitza. Avalim nishtakeya b'sheina v'loy kara. But if this person is mamish sleeping, so he's not saying the words, lo yotza, then even with the rest of Kriya Shema, he's not yotza. You're yotza if you say the words without kavanah, b'di'evet. But you're not yotza if you don't say the words. In the words of the Gemara in Brachas, ad kan mitzvahs kavanah. The first pasuk of Kriya Shema, you must have kavanah. Mikan ve'elech mitzvahs kriya. From the end of the first pasuk and on, there's a mitzvah of kriya, but you at least have to have kriya. If you don't even read the words, if you don't say the words, you're not yotza. Now the Mishnah Berurah puts in over here, V'dan, you should know that when we're talking about the differences in halacha between different parts of Kriya Shema, V'dan, you should know, says the Mishnah Berurah, there are three opinions amongst the poskim. Yesh Oimrim, there are those that say Darak Pasuk Rishon Balvad Hu Min HaTorah, that it's only the pasuk of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad that is a chiyuv min haTorah to recite. There's another opinion that says that the whole Ve'ahavta also, Shema and Ve'ahavta, is a mitzvah daraisa. And then there are those that say the Gamashniyahu min haTorah, that V'hayim Shemaya is also a chiyuv daraisa. Parsha Tzitzitz L'Kuli Almahu min haTorah, the last parsha of Vayomer is min haTorah according to everybody. Why? Kedei lahaskir Yitzias Mitzrayim. Because we have to be maskir Yitzias Mitzrayim, which is in the last parsha of Kriya Shema. And that's certainly a chiyuv daraisa. And we're supposed to have kavana when we get up to the end of the third parsha of Kriya Shema. We're supposed to have kavana that we're coming to be yotzeh the mitzvah say daraisa of mazkirin Yitzias Mitzrayim. The tiknu lahaskir b'zman Kriya Shema. The Chazal were masakin that we should be yotzeh the mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim at the time when we say Kriya Shema. V'ayin l'kamam b'simen samach zayin b'Mishnah Berurah b'shari tshuva sham. Okay, Sivav. HaKoirei Kriya Shema, when somebody is reciting Kriya Shema, lo yirmoiz be'enav. He shouldn't, wink with his eyes to signal something to somebody. V'lo yikroitz b'svasav, nor should he move his lips like to tell somebody he's in the middle of Kriya Shema and somebody wants him, and he goes, he's saying 1 minute without saying anything. He's just moving his lips. No, you don't do this by Kriya Shema. V'lo yeira'eh be'etz pa'osav, and you don't make a signal with your fingers, 1 minute. Be'parsha Rishona, by the first parsha, shu ikar kabbalos al malchus shamayim, b'mnei shenireh k'koirei aroi. It looks like you're treating Kriya Shema like an aroi. You're treating it like something lightweight. V'darshinon, and it's certainly not that way. We darshan the pasuk, asay oisam kva. We're supposed to make it something that's kva, something that's significant. Aroi is insignificant. If you're busy motioning with your fingers, making winks with your eyes, and signaling with your lips, that's making Kriya Shema insignificant. And it's not insignificant, it's very significant. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Yud Zayin, Lo Yermois. You're not supposed to hint with your eyes or anything. Va'afilu dvar mitzvah also lirbois. This is also even for a dvar mitzvah. V'choshkech also lishav tabak with Kriya Shema. Certainly you're not allowed to take some snuff, during Kriya Shema, shmek tabak, like they used to do in shul. Oiskan Yudches Parsha Rishona. The Mechaber says this halacha in the context of the first parsha, the Ahavta. V'yesh machmirim gam Parsha Shnia. There are those that are makbar on the second parsha, Vayim Shemaya, as well. Ach l'dvar mitzvah l'kol yalma mutar lirmois b'parsha shnia. For a dvar mitzvah, you could be meramis in the second parsha. Aval lahavsik lehed yoloi. Certainly, to be mafsik, you cannot do. V'ayin l'kamam b'simen samach vav. Siv Zayin, haya oisik b'malacha is somebody is busy doing his work. V'ratza likrois Kriya Shema, and now he wants to recite Kriya Shema. Yispatel b'malachta, he should stop his work. Ad sheyikra parsha Rishona, until he finishes the first parsha of Kriya Shema, the end of Ahavta, kidei shelo yehei kikarei aroi, so that again he shouldn't be treating Kriya Shema as something that's aroi, as something that's insignificant. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ad sheyikaru mashma debikan v'hala mutar afilu b'berachas Kriya Shema. The implication of the words of the Mechaber is that after the first pasuk of Kriya Shema, you somehow could be Isaac b'malach if you're stuck. And also for Berachas Kriya Shema. V'chein mavur behedi b'simen samach vav b'beis yosef b'dibur hamaschel l'mashe kasav rak im eroi ayin sham. V'ayil kabam b'simen kuf tzadik alav b'tasiv katan alav b'sarchin gadol. Okay. Says the Mechaber Sivches, ha'umanin, craftsmen, v'chein balabayis, shahayu oisim malacha b'roisha ilan, somebody, either a homeowner or a craftsman, is doing a malacha on the top of a tree. Maybe he's trimming a tree, or he's picking the fruits of a tree. Or he's, up on a building, when they're building a building. He's standing on top of the 4th-story wall, and he's laying bricks. They could recite Kriya Shema where they are. The Chazal will not matriach them to come down off the tree or to come down from the building in order to recite Kriya Shema. They have rishus from Chazal to recite Kriya Shema right where they are. Siftes hakatov, a carrier. A katov is like what do they call it? Like a dock worker, somebody who's carrying big packages. Hakatov. Ava pisha basayal ksefai, even though he's carrying his package, kairei Kriya Shema, he's allowed to lay in Kriya Shema. But he shouldn't start saying Kriya Shema when he's loading up his package, and not when he's unloading. So if he's walking and he's holding his package, you can say Kriya Shema. But he shouldn't say Kriya Shema while he's first putting the package on his shoulder or putting it down, because at that time he's not settled. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even if it's a big package, 4 kav, the legabi tefillah aser, you're not allowed to daven Shemona Esrei while you're holding such a package. Lekamam b'simin tzadik zayin sifhei, legabi Kriya Shema mutter. In the context of Kriya Shema, it is mutter to say Kriya Shema while you are carrying such a heavy load. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for Liman HaTorah. This is Liman HaTorah. Should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe should say Yeshua Sefuros Parnas should do them all as a need. We should be zeichet to see the BS Kal Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well. We'll continue next week, B'yos Hashem, with Siman Samach Daled. Have a good Shabbos, everyone. Be well.